All right, looks like we're live. Hey everybody, welcome to the live stream. It's been a while since Posh and I have been on a stream. It's been a while since I've done a stream, so welcome back everyone. And thank you to Dr. Crispy Rothschild. What a name that is. And it's got looks like some maybe homebrew beer in the thumbnail. Smash the like and share. So yes, good advice for the viewers. Um, yeah. So the context for today's show, this actually, I noticed I had scheduled a live stream I wanted to do way back in, I think it was January of this year. I was looking on Instagram, and I used to follow this guy. Maybe you've heard of him. It was, I can't remember his name now. It's John something. That doesn't help at all. But uh, but it's a guy who does the How to Paint Like a Feminist series on YouTube. Kind of a right wing ex military guy, and his videos are hilarious. It was like playing off Bob Ross, the famous painter with the big hair. Amazing guy, but he plays off that, and I didn't know, that he wasn't always as jovial as he is on those videos. And I saw a post on his Instagram, and the post was about, it was like a clip of, or a screenshot of a news article about like a teenager or a guy who's 18, 19, 20 maybe, who had gone and murdered a Catholic priest who had, or he had murdered or ravaged him violently, something like this, who had molested him or raped him when he was a kid. Okay, completely understandable. I get it. I get that circumstance. I especially understand reactionary violence in the middle of war situations, or if someone, kills grandma and you're right there. Okay. I'm not excusing it, but I'm saying it's understandable. And in this guy's case, it's also understandable. It's not like why would he do that? But what I noticed that started to turn my stomach was in the comments section. It was maybe, I don't know, thousands or more comments. And people were just celebrating, just vehemently celebrating this act of the kid. Uh, and just like, oh yeah, he got what he deserved, and it was just going over the top with celebrating it. And I could just, the visceral amount of evil that I could get from it. I was like, whoa. And I made just a comment, like I said, oh, so now we're celebrating violence and evil. And then the attack went on me, and expressions of wanting to do violence to me. And then, oh, this is one of those idiot Christians, right? Yeah, oh, Christians are so weak. This is why nothing will ever save the world, blah, 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 blah. And I commented a few more times and then gave up on it. But then I thought, oh, I'll do a live stream about this. This is how evil spreads through the world. And I thought of so many times that I'd done it myself. Like, oh, I could go the speed limit, but everyone drives over the speed limit. So now I'm not saying that's some grand evil, but if we all did drive the speed limit, there'd be far less chance that there's, deadly car accidents. So on some sense, we are putting ourselves and other people at risk when we make those kinds of excuses. So I noticed many times in my own life, I was with a woman who I knew was cheating on me, so I just started sleeping with whoever. This was many years ago, but I didn't even feel like it was wrong at that point. It was like everything was, I could justify things. So that was the impetus, let's say. People are just diving into the chat here.
I want to say most people jumped on when you were talking about how a girlfriend of mine was cheated on me, so now I sleep.
Yeah, I did. I didn't say now. I did. Yeah. So 15 years ago, a girl cheated on me. So now, ever since then, I just sleep with whoever. No. That was not what I said. I said in the context of that relationship. In the context of that relationship,
Yeah. I'd like to tag on to what you said. So for people who missed it,
please do.
For people who missed it, Garrett talked about how there was this young man who attacked a Catholic priest who had, molested him when he was a boy, and people are celebrating in the comments. And that is sort of how, and he tried to confront them and say, well, this is a bit much, and they weren't all too pleased. This is sort of partly a mob mentality thing, but I didn't know you were going to give that example. But what I wanted to mention is very much related. How when we have these sexual predators who were just horrible, of course, but then my example was how a lot of people say, well, we know what happens to those people in prison. So basically saying, people should be, those people should be violated in prison. And the thing is, it is a very slippery slope about that right there. And I disagree with it. I personally believe it should be capital punishment, but capital punishment should be quick and effective. You don't want to tread into vengeance, because there is no end to that. You will start down a demonic path, and the scope of people you believe will deserve such treatment will start expanding. But what I say is, oh, really, you want the how shall we say, you want the prisoners, the inmates, to deal out your justice? No, if you think that should be the punishment, then go out and start a campaign to introduce, forced, anal penetration for these crimes, and discuss the minutiae of length, girth, and duration and whatever. But they don't want to, do they? Because that would be embarrassing, and they would seem like maniacs. But in the heat of the moment, as you said, it was a post, so people were reading it and then writing it out. No one can blame that young man for what he did, but also celebrating should be we should be very cautious about, because people don't want to deal with actual criminality. They, as I said, they want the criminals to deal with criminals. That's not how it works. You don't want justice, you want vengeance. And someone asked, where's the justice in that? The person's dead. Do you think making him scream for an hour or so before he dies and writhing in pain, is that just? And by whose measure? Because if you want to go down that path, the pagans were very good at it. Sticking people alive on crosses and things like that, making they would pay the person who would crucify you. They would pay you by how long you stayed alive on the cross.
No.
Similar things with impaling on pikes and things like that. This is not a Christian thing to do. And there is no point at which, Satan or whatever demon is going to go, no, you can't strike down my warrior. No, that's not how it works, because Satan or the demon, some other demon, tricks the person into doing something wrong, and then tricks the other person into becoming violent, and then that spreads. And they don't care. They don't have champions. They have useful idiots.
Yeah.
And they are as beloved by Satan as useful idiots were to the Bolsheviks. They're the first ones against the wall. They don't care. So if you believe in Christian justice, you cannot allow it. And as I said, I support capital punishment for such crimes and other crimes. But I think we should not open the door of torture and vengeance, because there is no stopping point. Like Machiavelli said about war, they don't stop when you please.
Yeah. It's so yeah. I noticed. I agree with you on that. I noticed, and I don't know if I don't know yet what I feel about capital punishment. Not because I don't think it's justice, but because of that I guess that's the age-old argument, is if it's possible for someone who didn't commit the crime to be executed.
Yes, but that, as Peter Hitchens would say, well, then don't ever support any war, because there will be
Yeah,
collateral damage. So
of course.
unless you can guarantee that no one would ever kill any innocent in a war, then don't support war and be a pacifist, and then you would be completely consistent.
Right. Well, I don't support any war, as far as I know, up to now. I guess at least not willfully. Maybe tax money gets used for
Yes.
that purpose.
I think as an American, you have to pay taxes even if you're in Croatia.
Yeah.
Unless you renounce your American citizenship. I believe that's unique to America.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I know people from Britain where it's not the case. Yeah.
For the
To their
land
credit,
of the free.
Oh man. Yeah, and wanting the criminals to punish each other is how we end up with Australia, right? It wasn't that technically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Australia is the greatest freedom land ever. I don't. Is there anything in Australia that doesn't want to kill you? Like
Yeah, I
anything, the
don't know.
government wants to. Every single animal is venomous or poisonous. Every single plant.
Yeah, it's crazy. Somebody showed me, a friend from England went there a lot as a kid, and he showed me a photo of when you open the closet for the medicine cabinet, for the first aid kit. And a normal first aid kit here, might be this big, has some band-aids in it and stuff. But the one there is the entire door of the closet is what to do in case of each type of spider bite, each type of snake, each type of jellyfish, whatever else.
You have to drag a caravan, around.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty easy mode to live in Europe as far as that is concerned.
Yeah.
Even our venomous snakes aren't that venomous. But we have the Germans, so that sucks.
Yeah. I read some story about, was it something about a Serbian saint that, or was it somewhere in Croatia? I don't remember. It was about someone getting bit by a poisonous snake, and then the saint did some prayer there, and then it was like no one else will ever get bit by poisonous snakes in this area. Does that ring a bell?
No.
Okay, I'll have to.
No, not that I'm aware of it. We don't have snake handlers. That's not an Orthodox thing.
No, that's.
I can't remember who sent me a video of one of those snake handlers. And he got bit, and then he kept saying, "Doesn't matter, Jesus will heal me. Jesus will heal me," and he just collapsed afterwards.
Yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what the logical extrapolation of Protestantism. They take that one line and then extend
Yep.
it into.
Yeah, it's all like playing an RPG, and you unlock perks for your class, and you get poison resistance and things like that. But let's get back to the topic.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. You and I can drift for days like Dunov. So or Danube for our Western listeners. What I was thinking about with this evil thing was not so much these more extreme examples, although they're great to actually bring it into awareness. They're great to highlight it. But then I found the most important thing is to turn it back on myself and see, okay, where am I doing this? It's okay that I commented and everything, but if I were to make it my crusade to sit there and defend that in the comments, then I'd also be going off track. I know that.
Yes, you will be posting those comments. I'll pray for you, and like a very passive aggressive smiley face.
Yeah, that's also gets cringe real fast. So it's more like then I look in myself, where have I done this? And of course I gave those examples, but there's even more simple examples, like if somebody overpays you in change at the store or at the farmer's market or something. But the interesting thing, and this is built on the foundation of the idea that there's no neutral ground. Once you enter the spiritual life, you can realize there's no neutral ground. There's no we're just hanging out. There's although yes, we can relax. We're afforded the grace to actually have somewhat of a decent life, but that there should be this constant vigilance to examine our own behavior and what's going on, our own thoughts, our own disposition toward each other, toward ourselves, toward the world. And yeah, I mean, I even heard, I'll mention Cosmas as I always do, but he was even mentioning something where I was like blown away by the level of self-awareness he's recommending for people to have. But like, you're hanging out with people and the jokes start to turn into some evil direction and you catch yourself laughing. And he was mentioning even that as something to confess or to at least become aware of, you know.
Average Balkan conversation.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, you know, people here on the in the chat probably don't know the extent of Balkan swearing, and I've heard stuff about, you know, mentioning the Theotokos and the, you know, and Christ himself.
Yeah.
And,
in communism, this type of behavior was encouraged, and unfortunately, a lot of people have just, you know, it became habitual. You know, I don't tend to swear in English because I feel horrible, but I do swear in Serbian. And if you ask me to translate it, I'd feel horrible. But
yeah.
you know, it's basically like, you know, how they would say there's a way in which animals swear by activating certain centers in the brain. So it's not about saying, "Oh gosh darn it," instead of "God damn it." The state is the problem, but yes, absolute horrid blasphemy in swears, and those I don't do. Those I have never done. I think but yes, it's horrible, as you mentioned.
Yeah. Well, people were trying to teach me those right away when I first got to Balkan, like teaching me the local swear words. And when I asked what they mean, then I could get myself to say, I would say yebiga, yebote. Okay, those are not problematic, and the vibe in which they're used is usually jovial, and they serve some purpose, let's say, to some degree. But then this other, the pichku, you know, this whole thing, I could never say it because, and I can pronounce it, but I can't say it because if I say that in English, it's like no one ever says that, you know, unless it's like some aggressive kind of slander going on, you know, in US.
Yes. Yes.
You just don't say that like it's nothing, you know.
Yes. I want to go back to the example you gave about getting extra change back. You know, yeah. I do my best to make sure things are in order. You know, it happened to me like I was buying this flour, not the FLOUR flour, not the gay kind. And
I was going to say, is there a woman in your life?
Not yet.
Okay.
I need to lose at least 20 more pounds. Yeah. You see the picture for this that you put up, the thumbnail, you know, you can see my shirt sticking out. And I couldn't see it myself because of my stomach.
We are both looking pretty solid in that photo.
Oh yeah. So, but back to the topic. I remember this girl, obviously a novice in the shop. She gave me more money than I gave her.
Yeah.
And I gave it back to her, you know. And I remember, if I took that, I don't think she would last she lasted very long in the shop. You know, I don't go there often, but you know, if your calculus is so bad that you give back more money than you've received, you know, it's not like like a 20 cents or whatever. It's more, and but even that. It is an exercise because we think, oh, this is by accident. Well, as a Christian, you have to take into account providence. And even if you commit a sin, the saints are very clear that God sometimes allows us to fall into depravity because even depravity is better than pride. Because it's so much more difficult. You know, no one watches porn and does their business, you know, and feel good about it.
Yeah.
You know, you feel horrible. You feel ashamed. You just want to hide in a corner somewhere. But at least it keeps you away from pride.
Mm.
Because if you're proud of not being sinful, like the Pharisees were, that's such a difficult state to get out of, that
Yeah.
I'm not sure how one could deal with it. So if you happen to go to a store and you get more change than you should, that is in a way a test. Now, in our understanding of testing, as I said, is a blacksmithing term. It's a form of purifying metal.
Uh-huh.
So it's not pass or fail in that sense. Of course, if you fail, you break. But it is an act of kindness. It is a step towards God. If you're aware of it, of course, it's a step towards God to right the mistake of the other person, and you're not, you don't gloat about it, like you save the person's life or something.
Right.
Or a step towards the demonic if you decide to keep it and abuse a person's mistake. And that person works in a store as a cashier. They're not some, they can afford, to make these mistakes. You don't know, maybe they get fired or something. So it is a spiritual exercise as well. There's no such thing as a non-spiritual act.
Yeah, man, that makes me remember. This is maybe helpful in exposing some of the evil of the, let's say, solipsistic or non-dual mindset. There was a time when I was believing into that, and I was in. This was probably 15 or 20 years ago, and I was somewhere in Ventura, California, walking down the street, and I had run out of money. I don't remember the circumstances anymore, but I needed some money for some specific thing in the next day. And then I was walking down the street, and pretty far ahead of me, I saw a guy walking, and he dropped something. And I just slowly walked up, and he had already gotten into a car or gone in the house or something. I think it was in a house, because I think I realized I could actually have given it back to him. But I just picked it up and put it in my pocket. And my worldview at the time that was guiding my awareness was, there's no one else but me. It's solipsism. So this money was obviously for me, and it was the exact amount of the thing I needed. And I was like, oh, well, this is even more proof that, oh, wow, how beautiful the universe.
The conscious universe. Everything.
Isn't that amazing? Like how
that guy
how
probably
deceptive.
stole it himself or something.
It wasn't even a question. It wasn't even a question of that guy. It was like he was the pixel that delivered it. And it's such a rotten worldview, but it was so all encompassing that I didn't even feel the pangs of conscience about it.
I understand. I was raised very strictly as far as those things are concerned. Last time I was on, I think I mentioned my parents and grandparents wouldn't even let me go out back into the streets to play if I was still eating something. They said, you don't eat unless you have in front of people, unless you have enough to share.
Things like that.
But these are things that are instilled in you. But as much as people can have values instilled in them, those can change. I don't think you were raised, I'm guessing. I don't think you were raised with, hey, if someone drops their money, you just take it.
No, I wasn't. This was
exactly.
This was at the end of a long chain of incoherent worldviews that were, let's say, I mean, I can trace it back, but I see how evil works now, and this is important for the topic. In that, no, I was not raised with that. I was raised with quite the opposite of that, and I was raised to treat my neighbors kindly and all this stuff. And my dad's example was always amazing. I watched him as an electrician give people. I saw him bid jobs for these elderly people where I knew that the amount of money he spent on just equipment alone, just parts alone, was more than he charged them. And I saw him do it a bunch of times, and he would, if he saw that I caught him doing it, he would say, "Don't tell anybody about this." So he even had that attitude. It was strange to me at the time, but now I have a deep respect for him. But It was that it went from these weird politics to anarchism to protesting to anarchism to money is evil to I didn't sign up for any of this, so it's okay to take from a big corporation, or
Oh
like
yes.
all of these. So that evil developed itself through those philosophies, and then by the time I got to the non-dualism, the solipsism, it was like, oh, okay, this is there's nothing to be concerned with here. We don't even exist, which is absurd.
Yes, yes. One thing to mention is like the dialogue tree to justify something that benefits you or pleases you in some way
Mm-hmm.
is like 2 to 3 questions long.
Yeah.
And then the dialogue tree to explain, well, tell me why I have to do X, when you don't want to do something. It goes into dozens of questions. Well, why this, if this, then that, and this and that. But maybe I mentioned this the last time as well on my now inactive meme page in Serbian. I said nihilists never have to be philosophized into doing sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But they have to be philosophized into cleaning their garden and their rooms and doing the laundry and whatever, because as I said, that this type of nihilism or solipsism or whatever, it can apply to that as well, is strictly a means of how shall we say, rendering worthless the idea of doing something you don't want to.
Yeah.
And then you would then fall into some type of will to power or whatever type of, evolution has programmed me, I'm not lazy. It's just a means of conserving energy in times of, low caloric intake and whatever. You just say, sod off.
Yeah, man. It's
okay. So I'll go through a couple more pieces of wood in the fire and be back in a minute.
Okay, cool. Cool. So a couple things I wanted to also discuss about this, and partly how I found my way out of that type of philosophy relates to I'll call it embodiment. I don't like these terms because they get used and abused by the New Age and all the garbage out there. But this reason this channel is named Radical Undoing, that's a method of body movement, basically, to destroy chronic tension and then bring the awareness, which is usually trapped in the hell of the mind, to break out of that prison, get back into the body, to actuality, and then to know the difference between what's going on in the imagination, all this insanity and hell, versus what's actually happening. So a simple example is I've worked with a lot of people who have deep fears or anxiety going on, and even though they're safe, even though they're in a safe room, their bedroom, whatever, everything's fine, but they live in this constant anxiety. And it's generally because they're locked in the hell of the mind. I do this gesture because I conceive of it as this snow globe almost of demonic activity in the imagination. And people live and react to words and ideas as if they're more real than the actuality around them. So there's one particular Kanan, you asked, like bioenergetics, Alexander Lowen. I think Alexander Lowen's a little too, I like his work on the physical body stuff, but I think he's a little bit more, he's like undoing light, let's say. And he kind of has everything's couched in psychology. It's kind of godless in that way. It's couched in psychiatry. So
I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe it was some Croatian propaganda, but I'll be doing a stream tomorrow or on Saturday about truth or epistemology, and one thing I want to mention is how a lot of them have really, really gone into this very self-serving, partial acceptance of Freud.
Yeah.
Talking about, these people subconsciously want to X, Y, and Z. oh, really? Okay, what's consciousness? We don't know. Well, what's subconscious? Well, obviously, subconsciousness exists.
Yeah.
So we don't know what the thing is, but we know what the thing under it is. So rubbish.
Well, part of the fascinating thing about that and about the godless sciences of psychology and psychiatry is that because of their a priori assumptions that there's no God, that demons don't exist, that there's no actual evil in the world, that everything's physiological. These assumptions mean that they ignore the entire body of work, for example, of lives of saints or of writings of church fathers, of writings of monastics. And when you start to dig into that stuff, I'm hearing like they were dealing with the same issues that people deal with now, but they had ways of dealing with them that were repeatedly successful over time, over long periods of time, without recourse to medical, oftentimes without recourse to any medical intervention, sometimes.
Do you know the famous clip? I don't know what the film is. I don't care. Most cinematography is just propaganda for whatever type of thing is useful to the elites. But you know the one where when this guy says, hey, America is not the greatest country in the world. We're this in the number of these things, like 4th or 7th in literacy. And
I saw that the other day. Yeah. That's crazy.
So, and then we're only the top of, he says, the number of people incarcerated per capita, number of military, the amount of military spending, and then the number of people who believe angels are real. And this is
slight
written
on Christianity. Wow.
Oh yeah, and it was obviously written by a progressive who thinks college people are Republican conservatives.
Right.
But okay, that's adorable. But something more important, did you forget that there are angels in Islam?
Right.
So okay, progressive, go piss on the Muslims then.
A lot of people don't really understand Islam at all. They've just had it presented
They're just poor brown people whom Christians want to bomb. That's what they are, and we won't get into the current war. It's but this was long. This film long predated, but it's. I got that because you mentioned like they disregard angelology. Because technically they would have to also make fun of all types of religions they would like a lot of Buddhism, right. Hinduism, not to mention Hinduism, and like pagan and animistic religions and things like that. It's always Christianity, and the solution is always something that the government can pay this giant corporation, this pharmaceutical corporation, to produce, and then drug you up for not sitting still for 9 hours a day.
No. Yeah. So the main, let's say, thrust of the show tonight, the topic is how evil spreads, but then also, and I think the title didn't fix itself when I changed it. It says how evil and stupidity spread, but we're not going to cover stupidity. I mean, it's related, but how evil spreads and how to struggle against it. And it was supposed to say with special guest, the Posh Redneck. So I don't know if it says that or not. In my StreamYard, it says that, but the struggle against it. This is a fascinating aspect and probably the most important aspect of it. It's important to know how it spreads. But I think one way that it spreads, and I've seen it in almost everyone I know, and including myself, is they see something that other people do. Even commonly, like I said, speeding is a classic one, but other people do it. Yeah, other people do it, so I do it too, and it's just easy to excuse yourself. And I think with all kinds of evils, that's true. So let's move from there onto how to struggle against it. And one thing I want to bring up is that is the idea of mercy and acts of mercy. and I mean daily acts of mercy, not just deciding not to execute someone, but daily acts of mercy as a way to struggle against the evil in ourselves and against evil generally.
Okay, so a couple of things. One very common thing you hear, for example, here in Serbia, I would assume similar is true in Croatia. When you say, "Okay, don't do X," and it can be, as you said, stop signs. It can be turn signals. Yeah, just turn. Well, others don't do it. Common phrases. Što sam ja budala pa ja da radim, which basically means why am I supposed to be the fool and I'm going to be the smart one while everyone else does this? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, be the fool, because we sort of don't understand how enculturated we are with Christian presuppositions about morality, and we take them for granted, so it's all baseline is good, and it's not. It increases ever more. So one thing, because my city is famous for having horrible drivers, not technically, just reckless. Sort of, how taxi drivers are some of the best drivers, but their recklessness means that they just don't care and they break rules all the time, and never mind. So my mother told me about how people stopped giving the right turn signal. We're a right-hand driving country. The right signal, because, okay, you can understand that. But then after a while, people stopped giving the left turn signal. All the way to just on Monday, we went to visit a cousin who's on holiday from the United States. And a couple of people, it was nighttime. They didn't use the short lights. I don't know what you call them in English. Like long lights, short lights, do you call them?
Oh yeah, the regular, let's just say headlights, because there's headlights, and then in the US you'd say the brights. Let's say.
Okay. Yeah. So we say long and short, like duga svetla, kratka svetla. You're literally blinding the people on the other side, but if such apathy develops, because as we know from scripture, and I will get to scripture, these things spread, and they don't stop spreading, and they don't stop getting worse in both qualitatively and quantitatively. Again, you can say right turn signals. Okay, well, if you don't give the right, who cares? Because turning left is much more dangerous, because people from the other side don't know that you're turning, and they're not going to stop. So, and then, as I said, you don't go from the brights to the regulars. The other person might not be able to see, especially at nighttime. Again, so because anarchy it's not the default, but unless something is done about it, it's just going to promulgate itself. In scripture, the father of sin isn't Adam. The father of sin is Cain. When you want to call someone, in scripture, when someone is called, son of Adam, it tends to mean son of mortality, son of someone who is mortal, because that started with Adam. But when they're called son of Cain, they mean son of sin.
Yeah.
Right. And it's high beam and low beam. Thank you, Baron Strawberry.
There we go. Yeah. See, I don't know why I didn't even have that. Yeah.
Yeah. You see, you can learn something from Irishmen. You see the grandeur of the Lord. So as I was saying, that never stops. What does he say? He sevenfold, avenging 77-fold, etc., etc. You see this progression into more and more extreme forms of vengeance, which, again, why not? As we started with the example, why not keep someone alive just to torture them, and then bring them to the brink of death, and then heal them just so you can torture them more and more and more.
No.
Where does it stop?
Yeah.
What will happen is, how the free speech extremists used to warn the progressives, saying, you keep exacerbating this problem of cancel culture. What you are saying now is going to be problematic and toxic in a couple of years as things develop, because progressivism metastasizes extremely quickly.
Yeah.
And the time has come for a lot of people to that point where they have been thrown out for not being extreme enough. And I don't want to get into contemporary politics because it's bloody dumb. It's so low quality that I can't even bother unless prompted to. But this is what happened in the French Revolution. This is what happened in the Bolshevik Revolution. This is what happened in the revolution in China. This happens everywhere where you get into larger and larger acts of cruelty because you believe that it's only a matter of quality of cruelty that you're inflicting that would bring about the desired result. So, as I said, I support capital punishment for a lot of crimes, but I want it to be quick and efficient because I want it to be over with. Give them spiritual counseling. There are plenty of priests who go to prisons and jails and whatnot, because you don't want them to suffer. In the Christian mindset, the only reason we do wrong is because of demonic influence. Now we are accountable for submitting to it. So it's not like, oh, you can blame it on the demons. No, you can't, because you can resist them. You just didn't want to. So if you change that into humans being just completely autonomous, as in no influence from either the divine, the angelic, or the demonic, you're going to have a completely different perspective, and these people would then have to deal with other metaphysical issues, especially the lack of metaphysics.
Right. Yeah.
So you're going to have a collapse of the system. It's just that plenty of people implement or consider systems and measure it by utility. It's useful to have a Christian understanding up to this point, because everyone, when they do wrong, want to be forgiven. Maybe not everyone, there are exceptions, but people want to be forgiven. They don't tend to be big on forgiving. A lot of people revel in people wanting their forgiveness, which is also very demonic. A lot of women-oriented, cinematography is based around that. A guy on his knees, oh, I'm so sorry. So it's that idea. Look how much my forgiveness is demanded, etc.
There was. Go ahead.
Just want to say, if we then think of how God would react, like we are told we are dead in our sins, we deserve death, we deserve punishment. If you don't believe what you've done is deserving of punishment, of death, maybe not, but okay, what punishment do you deserve? And so many saints have talked about, especially Saint Isaac the Syrian, that God is so merciful that he isn't just. He doesn't set you in order right now. He gives you a lot of time that you would never accept from a secular judge. You keep going wrong and wrong and wrong. So, and you are forgiven. And Christ, I will repeat this parable. I think I personally believe it's more impactful than the one with, the beam in your own eye, splinter in your neighbor's eye, where this king forgives his servant, 1,000 talents in debt because he begs for him to forgive him. But then that servant of the king goes to his servant who owes him 100 shekels, and that his servant begs him for forgiveness, and he doesn't forgive him, and he gives him over to be beaten until he pays up. And then the king punishes when he finds out, he punishes the guy. So we constantly are reminded, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. That is a qualitative comparison. So forgive us as much as we forgive others.
Yeah.
And that is how it's going to be on Judgment Day, I'm afraid. So keep that in mind.
Well, and then blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy is another similar equation. And so I was thinking a lot about this mercy. And I'll see it. I can post. I'll do it right now so I don't forget. I think I can. Oh no, it doesn't matter. I'll post it once this is a video, so it's in the comments. But I will do it later. But you can find it easily by searching Orthodox Talks on YouTube or on Spotify, whatever. And then it's the only channel named that. And then I think it's number 46. But if you typed Orthodox Talks Mercy, it's going to be the first one that comes up. I think it's 3 or 4 hours, which I have no trouble with at all. I've listened to it twice, 2.5 times, and it's just so profound. And part of what got me to listen to it, and this leads up to this question of struggling against evil, because it's so slippery. I listened to talks about the toll houses, and we're not going to get into that right now, although it's a fascinating subject. But the way it was presented was just as a really simple way of looking at of self-examination through each of these 20 or 21, I think it's 20 or 21 stops in the toll houses. But it's basically different types of sin, or types of evil, gluttony, I don't know, a bunch of other ones, fornication, adultery, different things. But and it's terrifying to really consider for a second even what it would be like to go through anything even remotely like that, and to be held accountable, to watch and see the list of things you've done in your life, and known or unknown, or voluntary or involuntary. And the final toll house is that of mercilessness. And what it was mentioned was that even there was even drunks and prostitutes who had merciful hearts, who just sailed right on through the toll houses, regardless of what else they struggled with. They had merciful hearts. And then the next talk is the talk about blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. And I thought back to times in my life when just the tiniest things, they seemingly tiny, although now I realize there is no small act of mercy, but some are easier to do than others, let's say, more accessible on a daily basis. I remembered a time in Zagreb, and I'm walking down the street and I see this woman, and she just at a distance looked filthy, just covered in filth, but she was sitting on the park bench, and something in me and this was near the time of Advent, near the time of the Christmas spirit was being put up on the streets. It's beautiful to me, no matter where it is, and the people on the streets. And I was walking by with such a great sense of joy. And I walked up and gave some amount of money. She wasn't even reaching out for it, but I gave some amount of money, and she smiled. And that sense of revulsion in me turned around very quickly. And without knowing why I was doing it, I leaned in and gave her a hug. And as I pulled back, and I don't even know if anyone would believe this or not, but there was no more, at least in my mind, there was no more filth. There was no more anything. I was like, whoa, man, I could feel it now. My hair stands on end. I looked up, and she was just this clean, beautiful looking old woman. And I was just like, wow, man. And this was during a time when I had multiple experiences like this, day after day after day after day. One of the downfalls for me was 6 months to a year after that, trying to cling to that. Why isn't it like that all the time,
Yep. Yeah. Spiritual experiences, God knows how many we can handle. how many are good for us, because we all believe, oh, if I just had an angel come here and said, oh, stop drinking, and you would stop drinking. You probably would. You'd probably stop for a week.
But I was actually when that was happening, sometimes I would drink, and now looking back, I think it was to kind of temper the intensity of it. I would actually, like, whoa, this is, how could this be happening?
Yeah. And other things also come into play. Almsgiving is a massive thing. We tend to ignore it because it's the hardest thing, to give up. It's easier to give up. Okay, I won't buy meat for this week. I'll buy, potatoes or whatever. So.
Yeah.
But when you're supposed to give up money or possessions, it's like, come on, and then you. At least this happens to me, you try to argue with yourself, okay, how much do I need to give, then you try to figure out the minimum and then go a bit over that. And you start lawyering with yourself. And you just feel my nose growing as it's happening. But sometimes things happen like that happened to you. I'm not saying you weren't participating in it, but there's this context that was higher. But people shouldn't do such things as you didn't to try and have an experience.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask what I want to bring up, because on the Cosmos Talks, he mentions, do the merciful thing every time you get a chance. If you can, do it. And then he did mention all these stories from his experience as a priest, monk, and confessor, and things that people would tell him, where someone gave a house to the church that was $150,000 house. Then all these series of miracles happened where the person who was barely literate was able to get this advanced degree, and suddenly they went from making like $30,000 a year to making the exact amount that the house was valued at per year. And so he mentions this as he's trying to get people to do acts of mercy. And he also uses the rod as well, saying, well, and if you don't do acts of mercy, you could be forgiven for every sin, but this one you're not going to pass. You could have fasted your whole life, be in the desert, given alms, but if you didn't have a merciful heart, you're not going to make it through, essentially. So he did mention that, but then I've been focused on it lately and doing what I can to do acts of mercy. And I don't even want to say what they are because it's not what's important. But I noticed there's some of them that might take up a couple hours of my time, and I'm like, okay, I can do that. When it comes time to go do that thing, I do feel like I want to do something else. Then I go, okay, this is the spiritual battle, so I'm going to make myself do it. And then I notice once I'm there doing it, some of it's unpleasant or whatever, but the unpleasantness is tempered with grace. I'm given the ability to do it. I without too much resistance, without any kind of reaction, without struggle. The struggle is to get myself there in the first place. Yep. And then I started asking myself, when I'm out, like, okay, why am I if I am seen by someone else, I don't want to be seen by anyone else who knows me in town doing these things, because I don't want. I could already feel inside myself this. Oh wow, will I be recognized for this? And I'm like, man, shut up, just leave me alone. Please, leave me alone. That's not why I'm here. I just want to do this.
Yep, and do a little sign of the cross on your forehead. Pray for the intrusive thoughts to go away. These are the logismi we talk about. Just shoo them away. Try. If you start even thinking too much about, no, I'm doing this for God. I'm doing this for God. I'm doing this for God. No.
That's already problematic. Yeah.
Yes, because it becomes a bit prideful. I'm such a good servant of God. Try to do it, and try to think positive thoughts. but don't think about it. Try to think, I hope they're happy. Because those things will get you.
Yeah.
Like the idea of, I'm going to give this money to this poor person, and then someone sees you, oh my God, and snaps a picture, and then you end up on some wholesome people in Zagreb or whatever, and then
Yeah.
you're just sitting there watching it and going, "Ha, they don't even know who I am." No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's yeah.
Do things in secret. That is what Christ said.
Yeah. And it's almost like doing them in secret from yourself too. Like, stop, don't sit and analyze what's going on. Just be there in it. If it's shoveling, so I'll give an example of one that was that I'm willing to share. This is kind of funny. I don't know if I want to say the whole thing, but let's say, okay. So I was at a bar.
Promising start.
Yeah, I might as well, because if I struggle with these, some other people do too. So it's worth sharing. I'm willing to. I was at a bar, and I had quite a few beers to drink that evening, and I was in kind of a loving mood, and I think a little too loving. And a friend was there, and I at the time, I didn't even remember what exactly that I did, but it was something like I did some kind of gesture or something toward his girlfriend, and I knew in myself it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything like horrible. I'm still friends with the guy, but it was enough to stop that conversation, and now it was about this situation. Like, whoa, you're gonna apologize tomorrow, and I was like, actually, I'll apologize now. I don't know what I'm doing. I've had enough to drink. I'm gonna go out of here, but I'm sorry, guys. So fast forward. It put a weirdness and I'm friends with this group of guys, and I really appreciate these specific guys. They have their own friend group, and in Balkans, as an American, it's like to be invited into this friend group on the level of depth that they've invited me in is a really big deal to me. It's not something that's easy to go find. And so I felt like, man, I messed that up. I got into my head over it. And at some point I just wrote everybody that was involved in that situation and said, hey, this isn't how I want to operate, and I apologize for that. There's no excuse for it, but I do hope we can connect, we can hang out. And providentially enough, I ended up running into them 3 or 4 times, like at random moments late at night on the street or getting some food or whatever. And there was such a sense of oh, hey man, let's really let that go, And I had the opportunity to apologize directly. And then very recently, one of those guys had called me, sent me a message. Hey, are you busy the next morning at 9 a.m.? And I said, no, what do you need, man? And I noticed in myself, I was like, oh, that's great. I used to not say yes to favors until I knew what it was. And if I, wanted to do it. So I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I that's nice. What is it? Well, I need some help shoveling some dirt, breaking some concrete. And I was like, man, thank you for inviting me. Yes, I'd love to come. And I was thinking,
that's the best way to form friendships here. When you go over chop wood, and cement certain things, and that's where you're in.
Yeah, and so we had a morning beer, and we had some coffee on the way there to the house. I met 2 old neighbors, one really cool looking, 80-year-old guy with just a bright face, and it was just few nice little moments being there, and in some ways, and this might just be me making it up in my head, but in some ways I also took it as a tiny penance for this error I had made in the past, and I would have done it anyway, but I felt like, wow, I'm just being gifted this total opportunity to make things right with myself, with these other people, and I felt like it wasn't even work. It was like, sometimes I wish people would call me. I'm not on the top of everybody's family friend list here. It's just not how it works when you move to another country. That takes years and years of time and experience to get that close to someone. And with these guys, I was invited in. I even, made an error that some people would punish with violence, this kind of thing. And then was still invited back and forgiven, and even been offered this gracious opportunity to do an act of mercy, like help somebody out, do some digging. And again, it was easier than if I were to go do that same job for myself in that context. So I'm saying it because there was grace afforded me in that. I didn't have to struggle to get up. I didn't have to struggle to go there. I didn't have begrudgingly shovel the dirt. It was just like this fun morning,
Yeah, that's the best thing about I mentioned, I've here you get a friend. This is how men form friendships a lot of times. It's video games and hard labor.
Yeah.
You just go there in the morning, and then I remember this friend. We were. His house is like one side is basically in a hill, ends in a hill, and he needed to dig a lot of it out and then make like a patio, if that's the right word, I don't know.
Yeah, that's
but
correct.
okay, and then you go there in the morning, you come back at night to your house. We were in high school and stuff, so it's not a lot of duties meanwhile, and you tend to do these things in summer. But it's such a great thing. This entire culture that develops around it, when people are coming over to work, like was the case with me, you always try to have, some sweets, homemade sweets to offer them, some drinks, some preferably non-alcoholic if they're going on the scaffolding, maybe at the end of the that's how you've made a good friend, if they will come over and help with hard manual labor. Exactly, Athanasius, because that's I don't know, there's such a bonding moment because you're working pretty hard, and you don't never want to disappoint the other person. Author Eric says morning whiskey. I wouldn't wish on an enemy. So that's if you want to break up a friendship, you offer them whiskey. At least, yeah. I don't know what it's like over there. I remember trying whiskey, and as someone who's so used to rakia, I just thought, well, why would you do this to yourself? Like, I've got medicinal alcohol.
It depends on the whiskey, to be fair, but I think maybe whiskey might work better with Americans than it does with Slavs. But
yeah, because it's tasteless. Oh, it gets this from the barrel. Oh, great wood tasting alcohol. Thank you.
Yeah, to your credit, to the Balkans' credit, I love and specifically Serbian rakia. I did have some in Bulgaria and Sofia, which was very, very nice as well. But the best rakia I think I had was in either along Danube, in Golubac. There was just this, it's a small village, a beautiful village. I loved the people there. But in Golubac, there was a place we rented rooms for super cheap. And the guy was just wanting the owner or whoever, the guy running the bar at that time, really wanted to talk to me and ask what I thought of Serbia and everything. And I was fresh in Balkan at that time. And he was giving me samples of the rakia, and it was in these giant, beautiful glass, thick glass too, not just this fake shitty bottles, but like these, like, I don't know the name of it, but it's like a tube that goes like this, and then it's a big bulbous container at the bottom, and with the rakia in it, like a glass with a longer neck and then a giant.
Okay, that's a very old way of serving it. So maybe that's it. If it wasn't something fancy,
This wasn't in the glass. This was in the bottle, like the giant bottle. And then
I understand, but it's a very traditional shape. You got a lot of those back in the day, a lot of sets, and then little glasses on the sides and things like that.
Right.
So that was a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can also degrease your patio with rakia. With rakia, you can literally do anything.
Yeah.
Here it's medicine for literally anything, from eyesight to colds to disinfecting wounds, and also a cleaning agent.
Yeah. I've seen some grandmas.
It's like a non-evil Coca-Cola for cleaning.
Yeah. I've seen some grandmas wipe up the table with it, like at, before a holiday dinner. And I was on the bike path by the river here. I point at it. I have this thing where I'm talking and I'll point to the direction of the thing or the person. It's kind of funny. But yeah, I was on the river and along the, not like Christ walking on the water, but on the side path along the river. And there was some people in front of me, and the bottle fell out of their bike and crashed to the bike path. And an old grandma happened to be walking passed right after it had happened. And I went down, and it was a mother with kids who had dropped the bottle out of the bike. And whenever I see anyone drop food or drink, I feel sad, like I want to replace it for them or something. But uh, me and a friend started just picking up all the glass. We're like, no, it's fine, just go ahead. You know, I didn't want her to have to stop. And we picked it all up and put it away. And then the grandma on the bench was like, "Let's." She said in Croatian, I guess, but she said something to the effect of, "Oh, that smells like rakia. I guess the path needed to be cleaned," or something like this. Like, it's disinfecting the path. Don't worry.
Yeah. Now you can eat off it.
Yeah.
We veered a bit away from the topic.
We did. We get in. Hopefully, the cultural things are fun for people. But anyway, the point is, we were talking about how evil spreads, and usually it spreads in very small, seemingly innocuous ways. There are big ways, okay, but those are obvious. We could almost not wish for more obvious ways, but to fight evil in obvious ways is one thing. But I think that mercy is like this skeleton key in a way, that you can't really go wrong with acts of mercy. Yes, you can stumble into pride. Yes, you can stumble into vainglory. Okay, we got it. But there's so many opportunities for these tiny acts of mercy. And here's one where I did the wrong thing. I was at the beach bar on the river Drava here in the summertime, and I was talking to a friend's wife who's like I don't know if she's a teacher or something, really cool person to talk to. And we're having this great conversation. And then this guy came up who I've seen asking for money many, many times in the town. He's got a nice face on him. He doesn't look too menacing, let's say. You know, he's presentable. And he comes up, and if I had anything, I usually give it. And in my pocket, I only had a €5. Now, this was way better when it was kunas, because the value, if I had a 10 kuna bill or had tons of coins all the time, I'd just give them out, no problem. But with the €5, I was like, Now, at the same time, the calculation in my mind was like, well, I only have a 5, so I'm not going to give anything. But I've already spent probably 20 at the bar on beers that day. So now, like the calculus is very off here, and in my mind. So I could just give the 5, but the fact I'm even already asking about it is a sign that I've veered off the path. But the woman sitting there says, don't worry, he's always asking for money. She gives me an excuse, and I'm like, oh man, this is like this little biblical moment. And I didn't catch it until after he left, and I could feel my stomach turn just a little bit. I was cringing at myself, at my own calculations, at my own falling into this trap where I just give the 5 and be over it, because I would never later go, oh man, I really needed that 5, or oh, another beer was really important to me. So after he left, I carried that with me for the day, and it made me more aware. Okay, from now on, I'm going to give it if I have it in that situation. And I was also disgusted with myself for letting her, for yielding to her explanation, because that's not my logic. I don't think that way about it, And
well, you get a bit too rational. It's not irrational what she said.
No.
Nothing about it is wrong statistically.
And maybe she gave to him 20 times and had some frustrating, who knows? I can't account for her, and I won't judge her for that,
Exactly. But you always get into the idea, there are these criminal organizations that force people into begging. That's not a joke, and that's not a Balkan thing. That's everywhere.
Yeah.
Including, except for Ireland, because you can't give potatoes all that much. But you always think, oh no, I'm helping a criminal organization. But one story I heard was this friend of mine, and she saw this gypsy young lad, with he has like a withered leg. I don't know what exactly the thing is, what exactly the medical diagnosis would be. But he can't really walk that well and things like that. He just plays the guitar to try and get some money. And he asked her for 100 dinars, which is about $1. A dinar is about a cent. And she says, well, no, I can buy you something. I'll buy you something for 200. And I said, no, please. He said that unless he comes back with at least 500 every day, these people won't give his mother any food or something. So it becomes a lot more of a complex calculation, if you want to call it that, than just saying, oh, well, I'm not supporting this criminal syndicate, by giving these people money as if, they're going to go back and bathe in glory, sort of like thinking prostitutes, do it for fun. So I don't know. It's if you start getting too rational, you're going to end up in I don't know. It's similar to when you have debates about ethics with atheists or whatever. You can argue anything. You can rationalize yourself into anything. No one ever says, start rationalizing it if someone offered you free money. There's no strings attached whatsoever, You wouldn't start saying, well, if I could only so and so and so and so. No, but when you're supposed to give it, so
the other thing is you don't have to rationalize, at least as far as I know, you don't have to rationalize good acts, genuine acts of mercy. Like the example I've often used is someone's riding by on a bicycle and there's a car seat and the baby's about to fall out of the or bike seat, about to fall out of it, and you have the opportunity to catch the baby. You will never sit there and say, well, should I run out and catch the child? Should I help the drowning child in the river? You would never sit and rationalize doing acts of good. So it's kind of an indicator if you catch yourself starting to rationalize something, that maybe there's a simpler solution. Maybe the good is right there in front of you. But we often are rationalizing something evil, trying to bring it out of the realm of the spiritual battle and into this rational territory.
Can I say that Christian morality isn't consequentialist? We don't think if you give it out of genuine hope to help this person, your soul, your spirit is brought closer to God. Because it's so easy to rationalize into not giving it. Well done. You've convinced yourself not to give up anything of your own. But I want to bring in something that should always be hanging above every consideration you undergo, and that is you are not your own. Your entire life, everything you own, and are, belongs to God, and you have a certain duty to Him. It's the parable of a master going off on a trip, and leaves his servants with certain amounts of money, and they're expected to double it, right? One who gets the most doubles it, one who gets less doubles that, and the one who gets one is expected to double just that one. And he doesn't. And that's why he doesn't go into, he's not the good and faithful servant, as the very famous phrasing is in the parable. But if you start thinking, well, I earned my money, you needed health to earn that money, and where does your health come from? Well, I ate well. Okay, what about people who were born? Well, then you're either going to go into some type of Calvinist, when God hates them, or double predeterminism, and you know, just going to go into something that is from an Orthodox perspective, extremely demonic. You know, and God have mercy on those who have never heard of an alternative way of understanding it, of course. But if you think, as you said with your example of the man coming over and said you spent like 20 euros on beer, and then this 5 euro now you're contemplating about whether to give the person, you know, because you can, you know, those people say, oh, he's just going to use it on drugs or alcohol or cigarettes.
Yeah.
Well, you've just
like us, yeah,
fourfold on something that's, you know, pretty much self-destructive. You know, there's not a lot of genuine health benefits from, you know, you get some vitamin B, I suppose. You can get it in much better ways. You know, but so why does that person, if they're genuinely suffering and they get a beer, why don't they deserve, you know, that bit of mercy from you? You know, because again, well, even the person, you know, the focus on delayed gratification in our modern culture is considered conservative, you know, but it really isn't very Christian, because you're not told to save up all this money and then you go this and then you go do that. You know, you're expected, you know, when the Israelites go into the desert. What you get, do you remember the story? They get the bread of heaven, you know, often called manna bread, even though manna means what is this? So funny calling it manna bread. You know, but then the Lord says, take only one measure. We don't know how much a measure is exactly, but it's probably some type of vessel for measurement. And back in the day, they would have had the context for it.
It was basically the portion for that day alone,
yes,
right?
Per person.
Yeah, of
your household. And what the story says is some people try to take more. And what happens in the morning, it's rotten and infested with worms. And then it also says that there were people who took less and there were people who took more for the Sabbath day, when they were ordered the day before to take twice as much, and then the next day do the most difficult thing ever commanded by God, nothing. just relax. And he says those who took less always had enough, those who took more never had enough. Okay, so the thing is, this whole, and then there's like, you have a whole year where you leave the land fallow, and you know, God is not big on these calculating approaches to things, to ethics, to obedience. You know, sometimes we have to put our trust in him. And again, the stories about the Israelites doing that isn't so that we can, you know, laugh at the Jews or whatever. It's to recognize ourselves in that, because we do that every day.
Exactly. That's the point, yeah. And there's something that so many stories Cosmas mentioned. Those talks are such a wealth of information and practical advice. I really recommend them to anybody, especially English. Like if you only have English, it's such a great
You should
resource.
link the channel in the chat, or
I can put it in the live chat, and then I'll put it in after too. Yeah, I'll link it here because it's just so valuable. And
you mentioned it so many times. I think, you know, people might forget afterwards.
We'll put it there. Just even for folks who happen to be here now, they'll have it. And it's just such a great thing. And it's not the tip. You know, it's not the let's say it's not your typical Ortho Bros kind of content. I'm not going to comment on that or say it's right or wrong or anything, but this is more, he's not westernized from my perspective. He was born in Greece. He grew up, I believe, in Australia, but was a monk in Kosovo, in Greece. He, I believe, had some experience with the Russian church. I'm not sure, but then is in Australia. So he's very Easternized. So it puts him in a unique position as an English-speaking priest monk to be able to communicate to people who are Westernized and with English language. but drawing on the wealth of Eastern wisdom and lives of saints and whatnot.
One huge problem is that so much of Eastern Orthodox writing is not translated.
Right. That's that. Yeah.
It's, I mean, of course, it increases every year. A lot of converts do it. A lot of people who have, converted, they only have so much time to translate, so they will translate as time goes on. But it's such a massive wealth of knowledge, or at least a perspective that one could try to understand and take account of. But it's a real logistical problem, so to speak, to try and get it, as in. But that's why also orthodoxy isn't so much about the intellectual part. Traditionally, the intellectual aspects of your faith, of the faith, are left up to the bishops. Traditionally, the common folk wouldn't have received anything near the amount of education the average person receives nowadays. So when we think about it today, so somehow, like, okay, now it's a new moment, the circumstances have changed sufficiently so that we should engage with that as well. No one told you that.
Yeah.
No one gave you the authority to be able to consult these things.
Yeah, so what we can say, he's old school in the sense that he forces himself in all of his presentations to be presenting a mix of lives of saints, church fathers, canon, and scripture, and then sprinkles it in with some of his own direct experiences as both as a layman, then later as a monk, and then later as a priest monk. And it's well balanced every time. I will warn people, I found it very difficult to listen to, especially prior to my baptism. But I was getting overwhelmed and a little bit terrified. And the talks are progressive, meaning talk number one, he's not going so deep as he goes, as he's preparing you with each talk for the subsequent talks. So I was bouncing around and at some point got a little spooked and was overwhelmed by it, and I needed to get back to some of the Christ and God as forgiving, as merciful. I had to have some balance there, but it all served its purpose. And now I can listen to him chastising me and the audience, and I welcome it. It's like nectar. But I will say, if just for anyone listening, if you do go watch him and you get into it, you might want to start at the beginning and let it build from there. We've got just a few minutes left. I know, Posh, you need to go at about 9:30 our time. Two other things I wanted to mention. One is that about sharing your gifts as an act of mercy. As you mentioned, we don't truly own anything, and this is not in the World Economic Forum sense, but in a more holy sense. But to share your gifts. To not share your gifts is, he said, I can't remember if this was his exact words, but it was something to the effect of, to not share your gifts is like stealing from the poor and from other people.
Yeah, we have, there's like a story, this didactic story, not sure if it's based on actual events, but like a successful man in Greece, he's talented, good looking, well-to-do financially and everything. But he's unhappy, and he goes to Mount Athos and finds a spiritual father, an elder. I wouldn't say spiritual father because meeting him for the first time.
Sure.
He says, elder, I have money, I have looks, I have talents, I have so many things, yet I feel unhappy. What should I do? And the elder replies, well, as long as you view them as your own, you will not be happy. Because they're not yours. You are, as much as the word bishop, right, comes from episkopos, which is technically means overseer, right? If you break down the etymology, but it is a term that is used for a shepherd, right? You oversee a flock. And one thing we need to remember, historically speaking, is if you're a shepherd, looking over a flock, they're not your sheep. If you're rich enough to have a herd of sheep, you don't look after them yourself. You pay some young lad or whatever. So the term bishop itself implies that the person who is in charge of the flock in this area, they're not their sheep. They're Christ's sheep. But they are there and to serve a certain purpose of oversight and advice and responsibility, by the way. They are going to be judged as bishops. As St. Paul says, if you seek to be a bishop, you desire a good work. But not everyone should desire to be a teacher, he also says, because you will be held responsible for what you teach. If you preach, hatred and whatever, vengeance and vengefulness, you will be held account for what that has caused people to do. We will be judged by our works. Sorry for everyone who wants to say, well, I've got this ticket of I believed in the statement Jesus died for my sins. No.
And the effects of it, it's as if we're starting to rot away spiritually. And you can look, there's so many examples of this. The people, some of the Hollywood people or people with massive amounts of plastic surgery trying to cling to the past, trying to cling to their old image and their old fame and money and things. Any type of clinging and any type of life, the further away the life diverges, specifically from mercy. But I'm bringing up, I don't mean it as a shortcut, but I'm bringing up mercy because it seems like one of these rare things where you cannot go wrong by doing it, even if you gave the money and you did not know that other person was going to go do something sinful with it. Actually, there was an example Cosmos mentioned that's beautiful, and I cannot remember the details, but the essence is the same. Where I believe it was a saint had given, prior to being canonized, of course, had given a blue jacket or something to someone on the street, this woman who he thought needed it because she was going to freeze, and then the next day or a day later saw the jacket for sale in a shop in the town, and then was like, oh man, what did I do? Like, it felt bad about it. And then Christ appears to the saint wearing the jacket and says, no, you, or like Posh would say, no. But so he says, when you give to me. Don't worry about what happens after.
Exactly. That's another thing. The way you treat the least of these is the way you treat me. When I was hungry, you fed me. That's literally the point of being made in the image of God. That person is an image bearer. If you spit on the poor because they're poor, you spat on Christ. Yeah. If you feed the poor who are poor because they're poor, you fed Christ. There's no going around it. You can invent all types of crime novels, levels of machinations of criminality behind it. You're not getting away from that. And another thing is it's not perspectival per se, but it's the mindset. You do what you do with the amount of knowledge you have and the amount of gifts you have. So when Father Stephen DeYoung says, if I had a little cross, and I said, this cross was made from the cross that Christ was crucified in, and all the people in his church bowed down, to venerate. He says that they venerated the true cross. Only I couldn't venerate the true cross because I knew that it wasn't. This is the whole thing, prototype thing. This is the whole idea of the images and icons, which gets very deep, extremely deep. It's not just, oh, well, icons aren't technically idols. No. One of the biggest problems the church fathers had with Arius is because the problem of iconography. as in Christ being the icon of the Father, was put into question by Arian thinking. So, but again, that's a very deep topic, and one we shouldn't.
It's interesting stuff. It is,
Yeah.
but yeah. So, yeah, we're coming up toward the end here. So I want to just say a couple things. I'll do a very small plug for the work I do, which incidentally I don't really aim it at. My markets, let's say, or the people that I can help aren't generally so much Orthodox Christians, because if they've made it that far, they have the tools, they have the resources generally available for the spiritual life. But the people that do come my way, or that have come my way, part of how I ended up in Orthodoxy was because of a large number of clients. I've been doing this stuff for 15 years. A large number of clients, after they had come, worked with me and left, ended up in Orthodox church. And this was in Florida, in Mexico, in Texas, and in what else? There was a few others. It doesn't matter. But so I noticed that, and I found that very heartening. And that's what first ping that made me more aware of it. And then it was Jim Bob and Posh and so on from there. That's the short form. But for seekers, and I call it failed seekers, such as myself, who've dove deep and I was basically innocently seeking, even though I joined some Aleister Crowley group, I joined the Freemasons, I did all that stuff, but it was all, I was reading Bible at the same time. All that stuff was mashed together in that section of the bookstore, and that even in religious studies at the university, they had yoga going on, they had Buddhism, they had, it was all there. So I was seeking truth, and thank God that there was, what do they call that when you're going bowling and they put the safety things, so you can't, the ball can't.
I don't know how bowling works. Not a big thing.
They don't have bowling in Serbia, I know, but
yeah, in Serbia, yes, but it tends to be the pretentious douches who do it.
Nice. Well, anyway, there's this thing, you put bumpers in there, basically, so that for kids, so that the ball doesn't go into the gutter. Yeah, bumpers. It's like my journey through the seeking and the occult had bumpers on it, because I was probably very near very dark things, but none of it ever stuck. Never got stuck to me, and I always had some awareness that I was like, what is all this? This isn't what I signed up for. Come on, where's the truth? And so I was lucky enough to make it through. But a lot of my clients are starting to realize that seeking is not going anywhere, or if it is, it's not going somewhere where they originally intended. And so, as I mentioned, the work I do, it's purely physical, and it destroys chronic tensions that have become normalized in people. You can see it everywhere. You can feel it. And it breaks that apart, and primarily gets you out of the hell of the mind, back into the awareness of the actuality of the body and the situation around you, at which point something more akin to a spiritual life becomes more possible, because you're not reacting to the words, the ideas, the images, the emotions so much. You're actually able to see the difference between what's happening here and what's happening in the imagination. So that's basically what I do. Yeah. So
it's basically the attempt to de-Platonize the people, because Plato, not on his own accord, it doesn't originate with him, but this Greek understanding that a lot of, not me personally, but a lot of us, sometimes fall into thinking we're a mind or a soul trapped inside a body and things like that. So we sort of see the body as like a vessel to carry around the mind, which is a Platonic idea.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, brings a lot of bad theology in Protestant circles. That your body isn't a vessel, as all the saints say, who talk about the topic. Your body is supposed to undergo theosis as well. It's supposed to undergo healing. God gave it to you not as a punishment. It is restricted, as compared to the pre-lapsarian period before the fall, but it should undergo healing. You should treat it well. You should eat well. It doesn't mean be a douche and try to turn everything into some type of health. eat this, don't eat that, and let your life revolve around dietary restrictions and
No. We all pretty much know what's healthy and what's really not healthy, and you can start there, just to move in that other direction a little bit. But yeah, so if anybody watching or listening, some of these topics I get into with Posh, I enjoy this. I want it, and it's more about orthodoxy. But if for people watching, if this is all mystery to you, or if this is strange, or if you came here related to the undoing stuff, this is that's what I do. That stuff's available. You can reach out to me. I'm pretty accessible. If that's something you need, then we'll see. I see if I can help folks. If I can, great. If not, then I send them on somewhere else. But I often also mention to people who are struggling or suffering, hey, is there an Orthodox church in your area? And if they say, yeah, I say, go check it out. Just go for a visit, see what happens.
So just to say, Athanasius asks, what's the difference between spiritual father and priest? Is our priest not our spiritual father? Sort of by default, yes, but not always, not necessarily. Because what would happen if, your priest, God forbid, dies or is relocated to another area, which tends to happen if here, for example, if you're in a more rural area, and you show great promise, they would move you up to a more populated area because you've shown that you can deal with these things. The church tries to do the best they can, or if priests who are more educated tend to be put in more populated areas of the country, because it's not, you're not going to get into a lot of philosophical arguments in some village somewhere.
Yeah.
But then when you have to deal with people in certain in urban areas, you're going to get a lot of edgy teens and things like that. Sort of why it is required for a bishop to have a doctorate. You are expected to have certain responsibilities. It doesn't mean you are holier than anyone. There are abbots who are more holy than any bishop we have around, but they have their purpose, and that abbot could be a spiritual father to a bishop.
Yeah. I've heard stories like that. Yeah.
The patriarch has a father confessor and things like that. So a spiritual father can be someone in a monastery, that you visit on a pretty regular basis, but it needs to be someone you know personally. It needs to be someone you engage with who knows your weaknesses and struggles, because otherwise they can only give you generic advice, and that can only go so far.
Yeah. And as I understand it, it's also not, and correct me where I'm wrong, it's not quite something you go out in search of like you would, a doctor or something. I mean,
you go by default to your priest.
Yes, but it's something that may arise, and that maybe you might be yearning for it. At this moment, I feel a yearning for it, especially just because of the language barrier. I do receive that from my priest, but there's things that are just going to not be able to be discussed at the detail that I would like to discuss.
Yes, and can I also say, because you can have very young priests, not a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And when you look for a spiritual father, you want someone who's like with doctors,
Yeah.
There's a reason why they age, or at least are supposed to age well. Doesn't work out every time. But, so when you're a young priest, you're going to be, apprenticing under an older priest who knows things better and knows how to deal with things, because when priests are young, they tend to be full of fire and zeal, and they want to go and fix everything and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Turns out they run into a pretty large, substantial wall of problems, and that's also a thing that people take into account. If you get a young priest, he's not going to have a lot of experience, so it's difficult to get advice. So a lot of people, including those priests, are going to seek out old monks,
Yeah.
because as the logic goes, those people have undergone a lot of spiritual growth, theosis, and they can help you. But it's not enough to just read, the church fathers. That's intellectual. It can affect your spiritual life, and it should. But a lot of people tend to think, oh, you read, a church father who's a monastic, and then he is writing for other monastics, and then you think you should implement it, and then you fail miserably. And,
you can actually go into delusion there. There's
exactly,
many talks by Cosmos of,
Mm.
and people, even monks at Athos, throwing themselves out the window from falling into delusion. It's not like any of us are safe from that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll need to get going now.
Yeah,
so
I have to go as well. So as always, this opens the door to plenty more topics for next time. Posh, and I will mention that niche is still very much on my list, or even closer. But we'll figure it out. We'll figure that out.
Just let me know at least a week in advance.
Of course.
And when I shared the stream, I sort of committed to writing like a Baroque version of "Without Me" by Eminem.
Ooh.
For return, and now I'm regretting it. But
whoa! If you need any editing or proofreading on that, please, I'd love to help.
Okay, I'll let you know.
That's great. Oh man.
Too late to turn back now. So
exactly.
Okay, thank you for having me, and God bless.
Thanks for coming. God bless. See you soon. Vidimo se uskoro. No. Ciao.
Ciao.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate you guys coming over from Posh's channel. And if you like it here, check out the channel. Well, Emmanuel, I know you and I were both on Jim Bob's channel once together. I remember that beautiful room you were in during that particular episode. That's great. I'm glad we have a connection. So if you guys like it here, please subscribe. You can share it around. There's a bunch of other live streams on different topics that we've done. And then there's some older videos. It's kind of the scope of videos I've put out over the last 15 years or however long it is. But there's some cool exercises that you guys can try. Like I said, if you leave comments on the videos, I always get back to those. You can reach out to me via email, if anything, or if you're interested in some of the work I do. But we'll do more of these on some orthodox topics. And I just want to end today with just, over the next week, if you were inspired by some of what you heard here today, just think about that mercy topic and this, how evil spreads, but then also how you can struggle against it with acts of mercy. And I'm going to do the same, but just see when you can do small acts of mercy. And that can even be just not making a sarcastic comment back to somebody. That's one I struggle with quite a bit. Or, not continuing with some ridiculous argument on social media, or just helping people out with little things, or if there's some gift you have that you can share with somebody, try that out too. So hopefully some of you guys have been inspired by this, but I'd ask just that you don't leave it just as a video you watch, but something that you can allow to inspire you to go out and try these things out, try out the acts of mercy. Another one that comes to mind that I'll leave you with is when I go to the grocery stores here, and these people are worked pretty hard, the clerks, and I'll learn a few words in Croatian, and I'll say something like "svako dobro," which is like, if I'm translating it correctly, like I wish you everything good. And just in saying that, you just watch people's faces change. It just brightens up the whole moment, and sometimes not just for the clerk, but for the people in line, for the whole situation, and then for yourself too. If you're feeling down or if you're wasting your time, it can be a nice thing to go out and take a walk and look for opportunities to do acts of mercy. But and then maybe the more you do, the more you'll be afforded. So it's a beautiful thing, something you can try out right away, and it doesn't not only giving out money, it can be often something that you already have, something you're already capable of doing. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Thanks for coming, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more live streams here on the channel, and I'll be inviting Posh back again very soon. So good night, God bless, and thanks for coming. Enjoy, everybody. There we go.